Cornell West, for example, he's running third party. He's running through the Green Party. As you can imagine, he's already received a lot of hate from people because they're calling him a spoiler. How dare he run in the first place, but how dare he run outside of the Democratic Party? So the Democrats are really afraid that Cornell West is going to ruin things for them, so to speak. But at the same time, Cornell West, having seen what happened to Bernie Sanders and been a part of Bernie Sanders like campaigns.
And they're close friends. Yeah.
Exactly. He's like, I already know what they would do. So it does not make sense for me to run through the Democratic Party. When you see someone like him step up and come forward, because I told my audience, I was like, Cornell West does not have to do this. He can just retire and just chill on the beach. He doesn't have to run for president. To me, that kind of said that Dr. West sees that there's a sense of urgency and things really need to change. So to me, I kind of saw it as though he's taking it to that next level where Bernie Sanders wouldn't go. Bernie would not run outside of the Democratic Party. He wasn't willing to do that. What do you think about like a Cornell West campaign? And then we can get into your opinions about RFK and Marianne as well.
Well, it's funny that you bring this up because with my podcast co-host, Walter Kern, and we talked about Dr. West a lot last week. I remember during the Sanders runs, and I had a lot of friends who were either worked in the campaign or around the Sanders campaign. I was very interested in what was going to happen with that campaign. And there was this huge question that hovered over both of his runs. What do we do if we don't win? Right? What do we do with this huge amount of support that we've suddenly and unexpectedly amassed? And by the way, just to give you a sense of how unexpected this was for Bernie. Bernie had an early turnout at an event in Maine in his 2016 run, where they had so many people show up that they had to get a bigger venue. And Bernie thought this was the only time that was ever going to happen. He actually sent his staff to go get basically legal pads and try to go through the crowd and get everybody's addresses so that he wouldn't lose track of all of these supporters. Like, he thought that was his one chance to get a big audience. They had no idea what was coming, that this was going to be this national phenomenon where they got 37% of the vote or whatever it was. So they didn't know what to do. And when the question presented themselves the first time, I think, it was harder for Bernie. It was actually, he came closer to actually protesting against the party, I think in part because he dislikes Hillary so much personally. They were always really nasty to him, the Clintons, and it was an open question to him whether he was going to defy her or campaign hard or whatever it was. But he got along well with Joe Biden. He had always been friends with him. Remember, Bernie had to move from the House to the Senate, and he needed to be kind of mentored by some folks there. And Joe was somebody who was always there for him. And it was hard for him to imagine this idea of, burning it all down and taking a hard line with the party and demanding that they do something. Well, it's not hard for Dr. West. Obviously, he's a very outspoken man. He knows exactly what he believes in. He operates out of principle, not out of politics. I think that's very clear. And he has no compunction whatsoever about dealing out, some discomfort and pain to the Democratic Party. And for all those folks who are calling him a spoiler candidate, remember, there's no such thing anymore. Anybody can win, right? Like Donald Trump proved this. People thought it was mathematically impossible for somebody like that to win, or for Bernie, for that matter, to get as close as he did. The instant he gets over 6 or 7% in the polls, he becomes a major factor in this race, and he's almost there right now, isn't he? Cornell West. So I think his race is it's a major undercovered story right now because nobody wants to deal with the reality of it. I mean, they're going to have to cover it at some point, but he's for real. And I think also Americans, when they listen to him talk, they're going to find that they like him a lot more than they expect to, because he sort of radiates sincerity, courage, principle. A lot of things that are sort of absent from modern politics are very evident in him, and they translate very well in this new environment. Sorry, I'm going on about this, but I just think his whole phenomenon is very interesting. So yeah, you're right to focus on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree, because I've been saying for a long time it would be great if we had someone that was going to run third party independent that was popular, that people knew. Like Jesse Ventura came close to that at one point for 2020. Now, like, oh, that would be great. A lot of people know who Jesse Ventura is. And now here we are. And I think just listening to like MSNBC, people like Simone Sanders, Chuck Todd, etc., they are very, very scared because it is Dr. West. And it's hard for them to criticize him the way that they could some of the other candidates, because Dr. West knows so many people and a lot of people like him. It's hard to like attack someone when you're interviewing them and they call you brother. And he says that to everyone, whether it's Fox News or whether it's, MSNBC or CNN. And I think they're really concerned about that. But what's weird to me is that they talk about this 2024 race as though it's just owed to Joe Biden. We should just give it to him because he's already sitting there, when Joe Biden's having difficulty talking, difficulty walking. And it's very clear that I don't think he has the mental capacity to be president again for another 4 years. But mainstream media, they have their talking points, particularly from the State Department, and they're just telling people, no, you're gonna go ahead and just pick him anyway because we say so. And I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, I covered Biden a little bit in 2020, and I had one of the moments that was sort of changed my attitude about politics a little bit and journalism came when I watched a speech of his, and he, in the middle of it, clearly lost track of where he was, what he was talking about. It was very obvious that he was struggling with the basic process of campaigning, of figuring out what his affect should be. Like, he would sometimes give a speech, and when he was supposed to go soft, he would be rageful, and when it was supposed to be the opposite, he would do that. He was poking people in the chest. He was doing all these inappropriate things. I called up a psychiatrist who had been a source for a story about the idea that Donald Trump might need to be revoked according to the 25th Amendment. And Rolling Stone had asked me to do this story. I thought it was a little, kind of silly, but I did the story anyway. And he was very willing to talk about Donald Trump's mental problems in that interview. When I called this guy back about Joe Biden, he wouldn't talk on the record. And it was so totally dishonest, like this idea that here's somebody who's willing to violate this ethical code for this partisan reason, but you have somebody who might be president of the United States, who might be carrying the nuclear briefcase, and might really be demented, and they don't want to talk about that. It's just crazy, and they can't hide it anymore. It was very smart of them not to campaign for the rest of 2024, but now what are they going to do? They have 18 months left to go in this thing, or however long it is. That they can't hide it. And imagine him trying to debate somebody like Cornell West, or even trying to parry with him across the internet. West is so quick on his feet. He's so eloquent, and Biden can barely get through a sentence. It's embarrassing. And to watch all these people, defend it and just say, yeah, it's our duty to cast a vote for him. Why? Why is that? Why is that the case? Why do we owe this person our vote? This person who, because he's got institutional authorities behind him, we can get new institutional authorities behind somebody else. I just don't understand that reasoning.
100%. And I'm curious what you think about RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson choosing to run through the Democratic Party to primary Joe Biden. We've already heard that the Democratic Party or the DNC has decided there are not going to be any Democrat primary debates, which I think is ridiculous. I think there should be debates, especially considering the way that they're polling. But how do you feel about that? Now, I've had this conversation with Marianne. I told her, you already been through this. You ran in 2020. You know what the DNC is like. You know they're not going to let you debate. They're just not going to even give you the super delegates if need be. They'll let you get a few to make it seem like they're legit. But we all know how this worked with Bernie 2 election cycles in a row. And then particularly also with RFK Jr., who is getting a lot of attention, a lot of press. But I think it would be very disappointing for the American people to not see all 3 of those people. And there may be more. There's rumblings of Joe Manchin. Not see all 3 of those people actually have a Democrat primary debate. Do you think it's even worth their time? And do you think they should have a plan B when this is all done with?
Well, first of all, not allowing debates. What do you think the likely result of that is? It's just going to make more people support both of those candidates. They're going to be mad about that, and they're going to. It may affect the general election voting for Joe Biden. This idea, you're asking me to coddle the candidate because you think an incumbent president of the United States can't handle a debate, with these 2 figures. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. Both of those candidates are very interesting. I met Marianne in Iowa in the last cycle, and I was very impressed by her effect on the crowd. Like she seemed very interested in the topics that we were just talking about. This whole idea about people who are on the wrong end of the stick and are fighting against a corporate system that doesn't work really for almost anybody anymore. And that was the theme that she went with. And I thought she was really eloquent about that. That kind of voice needs to be heard. RFK is he's someone who has a lot of knowledge about a lot of topics. I disagree with him about a few things, but remember, his campaign manager is Dennis Kucinich, who is almost like the prophet of modern liberalism. I mean, all of the things that he ran on in 2004 and 2008, everybody said he was crazy, and now they're conventional politics in America, legalization of marijuana, even the trans issues. This is a guy who does know what it means to be poor. He grew up homeless and lived in a car, so it's a completely different sensibility than this, the kinds of candidates that they're putting forward, the DNC candidates. They need to be heard. They need to have that debate, but they can't have it because there's nothing they can run on. So they're going to do this thing where they shut these voices out and just hope and hold on for dear life and hope that they can get to the general election and beat somebody who may even be in prison by then. The fact that they're trailing in that general election is just, it should be such a wake-up call, but it's not. It's amazing.
I agree 100%. So one of the questions the question I have for the poll for people, I'll have to look at it later. But if RFK Jr., because he's polling higher than Marianne Williamson, if RFK Jr. does not win the Democratic primary, which I don't believe they will let him win, do you think if he were to change his position, let's say on Israel and Palestine, because that's where him and Dr. West fundamentally disagree, if he were to change his position on Israel and Palestine, do you think he should team up with Dr. West through the Green Party? How do you feel about that?
That's an interesting idea. I don't know if they would go for it. They have some issues they'd have to smooth over there that are not inconsequential, I think. But I'd be in favor of a third party run by RFK. He should do it because, look, if the Democratic Party is not going to fight fair, if they're going to do things like exclude people from debating or have the candidate not campaign, then sorry, you deserve a third party challenge that's going to take votes away from you. That's how politics works. If you want to do it the right way and give people a fair shot, and you still prevail, then you have the right to ask somebody like Bernie Sanders to campaign for you and get out of the way. But if you're going to be dirty about it, you got to expect that there are going to be consequences. And I think they should play hardball if that happens.
Well said. I'm also curious to hear your perspective about this. Let's say it does come down to Biden and Trump again, even though there's been multiple indictments against Donald Trump. I still think he's still in this race. He is still polling very high among the Republican primary challengers, and he continues to increase every time he gets a new indictment. It's just something that I've noticed. But if it comes down to Biden and Trump again, and then there's also Dr. West, that's the thing about running third party or independent, guys. You still get to be there at the end. Like, that's the thing. What do you think is going to happen? Do we get Trump again, or do you think Biden will win re-election?
Well, Biden has, as terrible as he is traditionally as a candidate, he does have this interesting ability to kind of retain sort of amorphously this base of support. That was an underreported story in 2020. He kept being dismissed over and over again because he was so terrible on the stump. And most of us campaign reporters are trained to think if somebody is awful on TV or if they make gaffes that they can't succeed. He does continue to maintain his numbers usually, although that has not been the case lately. Right now, it's going downward quickly now. But you know, the direction of the Democratic Party support has not been positive. There was a trend that started in 2020 where they started to lose votes with Hispanic voters, Black men. It was a small change in 2020, but it was noticeable enough to make some pollsters write a few things. And then women overall, oddly enough, right? But he lost tremendously with white men. But those trends have now been expanded, and they don't seem to be affected by his legal status. In fact, it seems like if he's in jail, that might actually help him somehow. And so, you know, I could easily see a situation where it would be the most amazing reality show in history. He'd be, you know, it'd be like the movie Shot Caller. He'd be sitting in the yard with you know, a couple of Secret Service agents conducting the presidency, you know, surrounded by cartons of Marlboros. It would be amazing to watch, but I think it could happen.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I think that we're in a time, like, I can only imagine what the history books are going to look like like when we're older. Like, what are the history like textbooks going to look like for this time period?